favours and their fortunes may change. Let's talk about that Charlton game then, because obviously it's been a horrific time for Leeds in London. That continued. They had the possession, they had the chances, but no points, no goals. Where did it all go wrong, John?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We had a really bad September, really. We were flying before that. August, we were top of the league, and we could have been even further ahead than we were. But yeah, the September was pretty dire, and it was topped off by that result against Charlton. Now, Charlton, as we know, they were always going to sit deep. They were always going to be hard to break down. They were always going to be stodgy. But they weren't. It wasn't that they sat from the off. They did go forward. They had basically one chance going forward, and they took it, and then that was everything they needed to just sit back and make it hard for us. So we didn't help ourselves. It was, again, another defensive error. There was basically a corner that the shot was taken off, and then Kiko Casilla palmed it into, we think, Stuart Dallas, and then it went in. The only other chance they had was a free kick from outside the box, and that was it. That was they were the two chances they had, and that's all they needed.
That is all they needed. I've done the Charlton fan show this week, and they commended the way that Leeds played, but they said it doesn't matter, chances, possession. They took their chance, even if it was off the back of Macaulay Bonne, who we spoke to. He didn't know much about it, Mark.
It's the problem that we've seen already this season. We gave away a very cheap goal. We did it against Swansea, Derby, Forest. Is another problem that we've had. The only goals we've conceded seem very preventable goals, which is the infuriating thing. I think we've let in 5, is it?
Yes,
so
five.
far?
And
that's a great stat in itself, isn't it?
It's the strongest defence in the league.
Yeah.
But we're still moaning about the 5 we've let in. The fact is, this is the Championship. It's one of the toughest leagues in the world for a reason. Because you've got to go to places, you've got to travel far a couple of times a week, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. You just need to be able to create enough to score at the other end, and that's where the problem lies.
To echo what you're saying, Mark, the Championship is a really tough division. I think it is one of the toughest. 46 games, you can play 2-3 times a week, sometimes, triple headers away, double headers away. You're going to get results like this. A bad day at the office, we can pass it off 1-0 to Charlton. It will happen. But how many times will Leeds look back at results like this when they are trying to get back to the so-called promised land? They're trying to get to that Premier League. How much will results like this, when they are sloppy goals, when they're dominating, are they going to look back and go, this is why we're in the playoffs, not the top 2, or why we fall out of the playoffs? Because it's these results, isn't it, John?
I think it will be. Yeah, I think. One thing that we ran on our Twitter account this week was we looked at box shot conversion. So obviously shooting in the box, you're much more likely to score. But in the games where we've dropped points so far, so against Swansea, against Derby and against Charlton, Swansea took 4 box shots and they scored 1. Derby took 3 and they scored 1, and Charlton took 2 and they scored 1. So we've really been quite unlucky. As a stats site, we are always going to talk about sample sizes and making sure that you're not getting carried away with runs of form, because we've seen it with Swansea. We were saying their underlying numbers probably won't stack up to where they end up at the end of the season. But with us, it's been the other way around, and you have to remind yourself: look, no team is going to do that. No, those 3 games, they had a conversion rate of box shots to 33%, and the rest of the league, I think, is about 11.9%. So it's just unlucky, really.
Mark, how annoying is it? I mean, no football fan wants their team to lose, but how frustrating is it when you lose, when you have outplayed your opponent? Everyone can take it when, look, we haven't turned up today, we're not at the races, but when you deserve to get something from the game, it's harder. It's a harder pill to swallow, isn't it?
Do you know the infuriating thing for me is that we're looking at last season, and we believe we're a better side than we were last season. We've learnt the lessons from last season, and yet we are seeing the same mistakes in the back half of last season that made us fall into the playoffs. So the games against QPR and Wigan, especially last year, we've seen those same things replicated. Just not taking the chances when they come to us, but also teams working out that they channel us wide, then we will continue to go wide and play the game they want us to play and throw the balls into the box. We have the worst crossing percentage in the league, and they know that they'll have 2 good headers in the centre back, and they'll chuck in the crosses, and then they'll deal with it, and it's not a problem. They can be down to 10 men like Wigan were, and it's not an issue. Well, that's a wider Bielsa issue that he needs to know. I think size, we will come onto it at some point, but he was a solution to that in the first half of last season. We need someone like Costa to step into that gap and be that brain, especially when someone like Pablo is out.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask, I feel like, could be wrong, and I want to ask you all stats, aren't we, that Leeds, when they do concede a goal, and it is rare, I feel like it's in the later stages of the game. Is there a stat for that? Because I always feel like last 15, 20, I don't know if that's fair to say, John.
It might be 80%, or that might have changed now.
It was all but Charlton, right?
Yeah, I think it's 4 out of 5.
Is that a worrying trend, can you see? Because, like, to hold on to games or to wait it out, does that fall down to the players, the management side? Because it's quite frustrating, isn't it?
It's interesting because actually in the last game, the game that we're about to go.
Are you liking my research there, John?
Yeah,
as well,
yeah,
from
that's
all
really
stats,
good.
Come
Yeah,
on!
I'm impressed, mate. In the last few games, we've changed the way that we played. We saw against Derby that after Click missed that penalty, we really dropped off on a high press, and we looked the word that everyone uses with Click, leggy. We looked tired, and interestingly enough, I feel as though when we came out against West Brom and we got that goal, in the latter stages of that game, we looked far more defensively pragmatic than we had done in any other game that I've seen under Bielsa, let alone this season. So maybe we are learning our lessons, and we are saying, if teams are going to do that to us, why not do it to them?
Well, let's talk about the game in midweek, because obviously let's put the Charlton frustrating defeat behind us. You did beat West Brom. They were unbeaten up till then. They were better in the second half, but you did hold on a huge 3 points. And I want to talk about the manager, because he's always animated. I felt like it was more so in this game. He was prowling that touchline. He was doing the classic crouching down. This one was huge, wasn't it? And you could tell through the manager.
I think he knew this was... especially after Charlton, your away form is better than your home form, and we've managed to reverse that in the last week. It's been great, but I think he was aware that was a big victory, and especially the clinging on. We need a 2-3-0 comfortable coast at home to get rid of the cobwebs, because it's as much in the stands as it is on the bench, and it's especially the way that Derby game. It's still going to hang over as a little bit at Elland Road. It was a game we should never have lost, and the fans, however much they say we've moved on and however well we play, it will be there. Yeah. We know how to throw away a lead. We've done it so much, and we've done it so much already this season. That's the infuriating thing. We also need to come back as well from being a goal behind. That Charlton game was worrying because we were a goal down and we didn't really look like it was a game we were going to win. We might have scraped a draw, but we didn't look like we were going to win it. We talk
about control all the time on All Stats, aren't we? And that is because that's all well and good when we're able to prevent other teams from scoring. But the problem is, as soon as you lose that first goal, then you don't need to really be controlled anymore. You need to be decisive. You need to be creative, like you were saying as well with Costa and Pablo and losing size. So yeah.
Well, last time I was on the show, you presented me with a Patrick Bamford stat that if he carried on converting the chances that he has been, he was going to get 27 goals, I believe. It's not quite happening that way so far. He was trying to claim the goal in the week. He didn't even get that one. It's now been given an own goal. So what's happening with that stat, John?
Yeah, well, that's Josh Hobbs' favourite stat, so I'll blame it on him.
Yeah, I am too. Let's talk about the managers, because there was no love lost in the week, was there?
Yeah, no. I don't know. I think Bilic is. We talked about.
He's a bit of a passion merchant, Bilic.
Yeah, but
I think there's a respect there.
Yeah, I think there was respect. And Bilic apparently went into the changing room afterwards and congratulated Leeds. He said that the game was really good. Obviously, Bielsa was enjoyed the game as well. So I think it was fine. And I think that they are both very interesting managers in the Championship, which sort of gave the game a bit of an edge. And I think most people would agree that it was the most entertaining game that there's been in the Championship so far. It was very open. It was very there was chances. It could have gone either way. I think it was a good advertisement for the Championship, as they say.
I don't want to say one step forward, 2 steps back at the minute, but you mentioned, John, it's not been the greatest of September. You probably would have looked at those 2 fixtures away to Charlton. I think we can get that result. West Brom, they're unbeaten. Maybe if we get a point. Was 3 points from 6 there when you are trying to achieve? Was that good enough? Looking at a reflection now, looking at those 2 games, Mark?
Well, we say it was a bad month. I think we've won 2, drawn 1, lost 1, right?
We only played 3 games in the month because of the
other one was before.
So technically, it's a loss, a draw, and a win. Yeah.
Well, the Derby game was the one that it was infuriating because everyone knows that penalty goes in. We are coasting. We probably even score a third, maybe even a fourth. We're that much in control. But Charlton, we've just seen the London stats. We never win in London. I'm not expecting us that. You'd want at least a draw from that game. We probably deserve the draw. Swansea, you probably deserve the draw as well. But we can't win every game. You can't get points from every game in this league. You just need to be consistent enough across the season. If we could keep up this level of consistency, we will be a top 2 side.
Yeah,
a minimum top 3.
Is there a stat for that?
Well, this is why we bang on about XG, because XG shows that the quality of the chances that you're taking are good enough for you to maybe win or draw games, rather than just taking shots or goals scored as your statistic.
I do love a stat. Statistically, where would you have to? How many points on average do you know would you have to get the top 2? Do you know, or does it not work out like that?
I can find that out.
Oh, I love it. I love being part of this show. All stats aren't we? Well, as we find that out, I'm delighted to say next up we'll be talking to Josh Schneider-Weiler all about his chat with the Director of Football at Leeds today.
Giving your team the coverage they deserve. Love Sport Radio.
An actor, a journalist, and a comedian walk into a bar, and they're all whining about Donald Trump.
Listen to Love Sport Radio on your smartphone today. Simply download the free Love Sport app from the App Store or Google Play. Tap the play button and you'll be able to listen to your favourite station. Anytime, anywhere. Love Sport Radio, the station giving fans a voice.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just, there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit WEDOOH.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
You probably think you're pretty good at multitasking behind the wheel. I mean, you have to multitask to drive. So what's wrong with checking your phone? The thing is, your brain simply doesn't work. Even a quick look at a message, or firing off a quick reply, affects your concentration and makes you less able to react to hazards. If you use a mobile phone while driving, you're 4 times more likely to crash. Think. Put your phone away.
Before you set off on a long journey, remember to check your vehicle. Are your tyres correctly inflated? And are the treads deep enough? Have you got enough fuel? Is your oil level right? Checking your vehicle doesn't take long, but can prevent a breakdown or accident. And save you money. So, before you set off on a long journey, check your tyres, fuel, and oil. Highways England, connecting the country.
This is Love Sport.
You are listening to the Leeds Fan Show on Love Sport Radio with me, Charlie Hawkins, and I'm joined in the studio with John McKenzie and Mark Thompson from All Stats, Aren't We? And you can get involved as well. This is your team, your voice. Tweet us at Love Sport Radio or call us on 0208 70 20 558. But one man we have called, and we're very excited to talk to him now, is Josh Schneider-Weiler from the Training Ground Guru podcast. Josh, a real pleasure to have you on tonight. Thank you for giving us a little bit of your time. We heard you had a very interesting chat today with the Leeds Director of Football.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure. And yeah, I did have, we had a great conversation with Victor Orta today. What a charming guy and a man who's clearly really passionate about his football. It just comes through when you talk to him, and he just lights up when he's talking football.
Hi, Josh. It's John here.
Hi, John.
Just a question about his backstory. Can you mentioned to me that he told you a little bit about where he came from, how he ended up in football. So could you maybe give us a little bit of a potted history?
Yeah, so he got his start at Radio Marca in Spain. Marca's the biggest national newspaper, and it was all because a friend kind of recommended him to Radio Marca, and then from there, it kind of took off. He ended up working at Eurosport. And then he got into the football agent. He was a football intermediary. He was a football agent at UFirst, which at the time really specialized with like NBA players. And he kind of started the football part of the department. And that's where he met Monchi at Sevilla. And that kind of kickstarted his career because he was representing Juande Ramos and Adriano, left back at the time. and so that's how he kind of got his foot in the door, was as a football agent. And then he got his first big break as 25, as a director of football at a team in the second division. So it all came really fast for him.
Hi, Josh. It's Mark here. I think obviously one of the interesting things is the relationship with Bielsa. We all know Bielsa's a very private individual. He doesn't really talk to the players much. Did you get any kind of insight as to what their relationship is like? Because obviously, Orta and Kinnear are one of the few that are allowed into that inner circle.
Yeah, I mean, he's known Bielsa for a long time. He tried to hire him twice when he was at Zenit and at Sevilla. So the third time's a lucky charm. And so he'd always wanted to work with Bielsa, and they, see eye to eye on many things. And they talk every day, 2 to 3 times a week in person. So they have a really good relationship, and they share some of the same values. They both really love how Leeds have like a really strong tradition and passionate fans, and that appealed to both of them. So I think they see eye to eye on a lot of things.
Just going back to that question, the thing that you mentioned, whereby he started out obviously working in media and then moved into intermediary work, and is now working as a director of football. Did you get any sense of what it is that motivates him as a person? Like what's his philosophy? What was the big goal? Was the big goal for him to be a director of football?
Well, I mean, he's clearly always had an interest. He talked about how when he was just a really passionate fan, and he used to write the lineups and tactics of all these teams around Europe when he was a fan in his notebook. So it's something that he's always clearly had an interest in, and kind of I think building a team, and he just really likes a challenge, which is something that also, kind of makes him similar to Bielsa. They wanted a challenge. It's not just about doing it for any team. They always look for a team with a history and with a bit of a challenge.
Obviously, getting Bielsa was a massive coup for Orta, and if Bielsa takes us up, I think that's probably what everyone will remember from his time here. But that first season and some of his signings just frankly haven't worked out. I think we've sold something like 30 players this summer. A large number of those were players that he brought in. Did he give any sort of reasons or excuses as to why such a large quantity of those players just didn't work out?
He didn't really talk as much about the players, but, he did talk about, his hiring of Paul Heckingbottom and kind of the mistake that was made there. Not that, Paul was a bad coach by any means, but that it was under tight time constraints, and they had only kind of made the decision in a short period of time. We're talking days here, and as it was a quick decision, that kind of led to it not working out so well. And it was that first year, though, that after that hiring, that he kind of realized he needed a really strong personality, and that's kind of what gave him the idea for Bielsa. Well, not specifically Bielsa, but he realized they needed a really strong character and personality to be the next manager.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm wondering whether or not he mentioned at all the relationship that he has with fans, because I think obviously as a result of what it was that Mark was talking about there, I think there was a lot of fans who were quite suspicious of him. We were one of the few teams, I think, at the time who had a director of football in the Championship, and I think now if you were to ask most Leeds fans, I think they would be largely positive about Orta. So did he talk about that side of his experiences at all?
Well, I mean, one of the things he mentioned was how just in general in England, a lot of people still kind of, distrust or mistrust the director of football position, and how that's changing. And he actually pointed to Stuart Webber at Norwich and was hoping that he would be kind of a shining light for people to, appreciate the position of the director of football. But it's funny. He still thinks of himself very much, I think, as a fan. It's a bit different, but it's clearly still in him. He's a fan of the game first and foremost, and he, clearly just loves watching games. And so I think he can still relate to fans, but he just was really, I think, pleased with kind of the direction of fans appreciating the director of football a little bit more.
I think another thing that fans asked a lot of questions over in the summer was centre-back. And obviously we lost Janssen, and everyone was looking at Ben White and being, oh, we're bringing this very young player to replace a Swedish international. And all we kept hearing from especially Phil Hay was that Bielsa is happy with his centre-backs, is happy with the number of centre-backs he has. But that the club were advising him maybe to get others. Did you hear from Orta any kind of disagreements that he's had with Bielsa over players that he wants to sign or players that he wants to bring in?
No, we didn't really get into specifics about which players they were looking at all, especially not at center backs. But what he did say is that I wouldn't, if I was a Leeds fan, I would not be expecting any signings for the most part in January, because he mentioned that the January window is a really difficult time to make transfers, and it doesn't seem like they will be doing much in the January window. So I wouldn't expect too much, in terms of center backs or anyone.
I imagine he's a bit burned by Dan James there as well. We've all seen it in the documentary. So
yeah.
One last question, Josh. You alluded in the intro that he's a lovely guy. What sort of sense did you get about his personality?
Yeah, I mean, he's just so charming and just warm, and you meet him, and I like the first part of the interview. I mean, I wasn't even doing the questioning, and he was addressing me. So he's just a really warm guy, and clearly has a way with people. I mean, it's no surprise that he was an intermediary, and kind of rose through the ranks as quickly as he did, because he's just got a warm personality that I think anyone can really appreciate.
Josh, just very quickly, if we want to check out the interview, which I do, where can people find it? Where can fans go to listen to it, and where can we find you?
It's called the Training Ground Guru podcast, and you can find it wherever you listen to your podcast. So that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can get it. It's called the Training Ground Guru podcast.
Josh, we'll certainly check that out, as I know Leeds fans will. Thank you for giving us a little bit of your time this evening. A real pleasure to speak to you. Josh Schneider-Weiler there from the Training Ground Guru podcast. Well, just before we spoke to Josh, I asked you about a stat. What was needed to make that top two? What were the points total needed? I think, Mark, we have that answer now, don't we?
Yeah, top two is 1.89 points per game, so that's about 87 points in total. And champions is 2.02 points per game, so that's 93. And we're on two.
Bang in between it.
Yeah. So we're fighting for. We're definitely top two form, even though sometimes we may not feel it.
Well, that's exactly the position you want to be in, because obviously it'd be nice to go up top two and not have to deal with the playoffs again.
Yeah, I can't. No.
Mark said I can't. So even if it does, he's not entertaining it whatsoever, because
I'm going away.
He's going away. You heard it from him himself. Well, next up, I'm delighted to say, is the listener questions.
This is Love Sport.
This Saturday from 8 a.m, join me, Patrick Christys and David Prutton on Love Sport Weekend Breakfast with former England and Lions rugby player Ian Hunter. We'll be with you until noon with all the build-up, updates and analysis of England's battle against old enemy Argentina at the Rugby World Cup. Then next Saturday from 8 a.m, Ewan Thomas, Paul Mortimer and Ian Hunter bring you can't-miss coverage of Le Crunch as England and France face off in a decisive group game. Love Sport Weekend Breakfast, Saturday from 8 a.m.
Love Sport.
Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October. This means that travelling to the EU will change. You'll need to check online if your passport is valid for travel to Europe. If you're planning on driving, you'll need to check if you have the right documents to drive. And make sure your travel insurance covers all your healthcare needs. To keep your trip on track, check what you need to do at gov.uk/Brexit. Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October.
Hi, I'm Dean. I work for a successful shipping company in Suffolk. Ever since I heard about people's success with the spokesmansaid.com, I knew I had to investigate for myself. Every time I need to compare car insurance, home insurance and energy bills, I always contact a spokesmansaid.com. This year alone, I saved over £260 on my car insurance and also £585 on my energy bills. I saved big through a spokesmansaid.com, and you could too.
With a spokesmansaid.com. Fighting for you, saving you money.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit WEDOOH.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
If you see somebody showing any of the signs of a stroke, you don't have to think about it, you just dial 999. Use the FAST test. F. Face. Has their face fallen on one side? Can they smile? A. Arms. Can they raise both arms and keep them there? S. Speech. Is their speech slurred? T. Time. Time to call 999 if you see any one of these signs. Act fast, make the call, dial 999.
Have you had enough of extortionate energy bills? A spokesman said could help you find the cheapest energy deals on the market. Don't take our word for it. There's hundreds of spokesman said customers who've saved big. Brian from Derbyshire saved £400 on his energy bills, and Tony from Northampton saved a massive £2,800 on his gas and electric. A spokesmansaid.com, the leading price comparison site where you can switch to the cheapest energy tariffs on the market in just minutes.
The spokesmansaid.com. Fighting for you, saving you money.
Love sport.
You are listening to the Leeds Fan Show on Love Sport Radio with me, Charlie Hawkins, and I'm joined in the studio with John McKenzie and Mark Thompson from All Stats, aren't we? And it has been a night of stats that I am enjoying. Leeds not so much, because London trips aren't that good at the minute. They're hoping that will change this weekend when they play Millwall. We'll do a little game preview in a moment's time. Now, though, it is another favourite part of the show. It is the listener questions. First one: if Stuart Dallas is our most complete footballer, which member of the first 11 do you consider as our most incomplete footballer?
I'm going to pass this over to Mark because I know he has strong feelings about this.
I can't wait.
Alioski. I'm just not even sure he's a footballer. He's a great athlete. He's a great athlete. He brings a lot to the team.
Yeah, you back down, Mark.
But the brain. He's got a bit of a Hadi Sacco brain. For Leeds fans, they'll know what that means. He gets into certain positions and then he just gets really excited.
Alexis Sanchez. You know how he does exactly the wrong thing in every scenario. He's basically like that.
But at the same time, he gets results. Like the amount of, I think I looked this up. He was 5th for our goals scored last year, 3rd for assists, and 2nd behind Click in second assists. And he's a left back.
Yeah.
But that
he doesn't really play like a left back.
He doesn't play.
Let's face it.
He's a free roaming left back because he's not a footballer.
It's a false three.
It's an idea of just like, here is just a line of pitch. Just run up and down it as much as you can and annoy people. And he's really good at it, as long as that's the instruction he's given.
Did you know that Sony game, the really old one, where you had like all the footballers on a twizzle stick and you push it and they would go just in a straight line forwards and backwards? Yeah. That's basically him.
Listen, it's more than I could do at school. The next question: no I in team. Why do you think so many Leeds United fans still focus on the individual rather than the system when assessing a player's merit, i.e. the criticism of Harrison Bamford for perceived individual failures in spite of what they clearly bring to the collective? Side before self every single time.
Yeah, I think that this is interesting, and this is something that we've tried to talk about a lot on All Stats On. This notion that Bielsa is all about the system. We've said it before. People talk about Plan B as well, but what Bielsa has done is he's owned this system where you can bring in players and play to their strengths. So rather than it sort of being a formation, it is a system. It sort of fluctuates, quite fluid. You can do things with it differently depending on the players that you've got in it, so that you can bring more out of it. But all Leeds fans should know that this squad was basically like lower table before Bielsa came in. So if you're assessing the individuals, then you're always going to be missing out on the strength of what it is that Bielsa does. It is all about that cohesion. It is all about that coherence that you get when you play the team together. So yeah, I think I fully agree with that. I don't know why we do I mean, obviously with Bamford, it's obvious why because he's a striker. You know, you want your striker to score, but at the same time, and I think what was great about the West Brom game was that it was the first sense, I think, that we got where people actually really understood how important Bamford is to the system, not just in terms of scoring goals.
I think there's also a bit of conditioning in it from the fan side. We've been let down so much in the past. Playoffs, cup finals, Champions League. I mean, it's there. And it's really handy if you have a scapegoat. It's really, really nice if you've prepared yourself psychologically and be like, well, it's definitely his fault. It's got to be. And we like to pick on one. Like, even Champions League, we had Ian Hart, who is everyone's least favourite left back. Like, it was the one that, why didn't we Arne Riise? Like, he was going to join us, and then we've ended up with Hart, who's got the turning circle of a, I don't know, tanker or something. But I think it's also comforting that when things go wrong, you've like psychologically prepared yourself for them going wrong by pre-blaming someone. It's really, I find it comforting.
We do the other thing as well as Leeds fans, which is we look for solutions outside of the actual playing 11. So we're like, well, if we played X, who was on the bench or who is not in the squad at the moment, then everything that all of these problems that we had would be solved.
I think every football club does that.
The running joke is Ryan Edmondson is going to solve all our problems. The 19-year-old who's like, played one game for us.
Well, just for all the listeners out there, these questions aren't just questions. They have headers before the questions, and this one is an absolute goldmine. Caught in the middle with Stu. Hey, is Dallas into midfield the right move? Could Click do the Forshaw stuff and let one of the other hip young gunslingers do the Click stuff?
Yeah, I think this is interesting. I didn't listen to the pre-match presser. Did you catch up with it? Because the impression I got was that maybe Dallas is going to be playing in the middle.
That was the first thing he said, was that we have an option to play Dallas in the middle with Ayling at full-back. He said, but then immediately said, although our other option is we can bring in Roberts and drop Click back.
Yeah.
And, I mean, when you look at the squad, that is the obvious thing to do. You do one of those two things. For me, Dallas has probably been the best right-back in the division, so why would you move him out of that place? And that's really weird for me to say because he's a left winger. But he has been, him and Ben White have been easily the two most consistent players on our side. So why would you disrupt that dynamic? I think if it was anywhere other than Millwall away, I would love to see Robbie Gotts come in because we're looking for young players to step up. Bielsa's happy to do that. He is a mini Shackleton. He's just, well, I say they're the same age, basically. But they are the same player in a lot of ways. They have that creativity, they can run forward. And he's been on the bench. I think he's the most unused substitute in our history. It's over 20 or 30 games or something now that he's just been on the bench unused. I think he'll be on the bench again, but the problem is when we saw Cook come off the bench at Millwall, this is Lewis Cook, who's now gone on to represent England. He gave away a penalty. He was only on for 30 minutes. It's not a good place for a lad to make his debut.
Yeah, I agree with this. Millwall isn't a place where we're going to sit and then be under the cosh for 90 minutes. We are going to be having to break
John,
down.
Millwall are on afterwards. You have to leave this studio alive.
I think there might be some of them out there already, listening in. But yeah, look, the way that they play is not possession heavy. They do look to take you on the counter attack. They do like to take you through set pieces and corners, free kicks. That's what they're going to try and do. And against Leeds, that's a perfectly adequate tactic. I think the thing is that we don't really. Do we really want a sort of more defensive central midfielder in that team with Phillips there already? I would rather see Click drop back. That's where he played last season, and then
it seems like the most natural thing to do is to drop Click back, bring in Roberts. The only advantage is obviously with Cooper out, Ayling is a more natural defender from set pieces. He's got a bit more height back there. Roberts might not instinctively have the positioning from set pieces to help out, but that's not Bielsa's style. Bielsa does us first, them a distant second. So
well, we said these questions have good headers. The next one is brilliant. It's V's Millwall. Based on your data, which of the absentees will be affected by the most against Millwall?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're missing Forshaw, we're missing Cooper, we're missing, who else are we missing?
Pablo.
Oh, of course, Pablo. Well, I mean, obviously we're going to miss Pablo the most. Yeah. Forshaw, as we all know, is the most integral member of our team, as I like to remind everyone. And if you actually look at, we've talked about box shots before, you can almost correlate with how many box shots we're going to concede with whether or not Forshaw was playing or not. So against a team like Millwall, though, as we said, maybe Forshaw's upside probably won't shine through as much. If they do sit deep and it's about unlocking their defence, then obviously Pablo is important. So I'm going to say Pablo.
I have a slightly different view.
You're going to say Cooper,
yeah. Pablo never shows up at Millwall. Never shows up. He just on the road in London, especially, just never turns up. So I'm not really that worried about that. Cooper is the one just because Big Matt Smith is their main goal threat. We know like long throws corners. That's where it's going to happen. I think I've got another stat here. By January last year, we had 10 different centre-back combinations involving 7 players, and we're freaking out because we've lost one. We have the same number of defenders we had last year, and we coped. We were first, and we'd had 10 different centre-back combinations. We can panic all we want, but there's a reason Bielsa has the size squad he has. It's because that's what he wants. And as I said before, he does us first, he does them second, and he'll stick Berardi on Matt Smith, and we'll really enjoy the optics of it. He'll climb up his back like he did with Aidan Flint at Middlesbrough, and it'll be all over social media, but he won't care.
Yeah.
It's if it takes away from us, he doesn't care because it will give to them.
Yeah. I've just had a vision of a Cooperless defence against Millwall and Berardi in there. So yeah, I'm going to change mine to Cooper as well, I think.
Well, the next question, are we set for a tumble? Will our XG rating fall as the system picks up the fact that we're struggling to score?
If anything, you'd expect the opposite to happen.
Yeah.
Because if the XG is that good, you'd expect at some point we can actually finish our chances, and things will like the XG is there to say these are goals that you should score a decent percentage of, and we are currently below that. So at some point you'd hope that our goal scoring catches up with it. The problem with Bamford is he tends to get 1 and then he'll get 3.
Yeah.
And then he'll go through a barren stretch
in a game. Won't
this is the ridiculous thing. Like, so you always say 1 and 2 for a striker is pretty good. He's got 4 and 10.
It's not bad.
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And he did the same last season. He's just infuriating because he misses so many easy chances. But to be honest, if he plays like he did against West Brom, he will do enough for the team to warrant his selection each week, which is incredible considering you've got a guy like Nketiah on the bench who is probably worth 25 million conservative.
Ooh, I'm not sure about 25 million.
But think about it. Like, he's an England under-21 international. Like, Sancho before he left for Man City was still worth a good chunk. I think Arsenal fans would put it up there.
I'm interested to hear how much you would value Eddie
How
Nketiah. Just
much?
out of interest.
I mean, he's a super talent. I think he comes from a super club. And I've been
how much is Charlie Hawkins paying? If Charlie Hawkins shelling through his wallet, how much is he paying for Eddie Nketiah?
Listen, Mark makes a very good point. You know, English talent, it's always going to go. The market inflates, doesn't it? Because that's what happens. 25 million, I think, is very, very strong. Because yes, he's a raw talent, but he is unproven. We're hoping he bangs it in every week for Leeds because that's the player that Arsenal wants to come back. But 25 million, when you haven't done it at Premiership level, you haven't got those starts, I think is still quite hefty.
Okay, maybe it was I think it's a bit premature. If he scores 20 this season...
Listen, he can easily, the potential.
The talk when Abraham was whacking in for Bristol City... That was the numbers being touted around for him. And from what we've seen of him, he can finish.
Yeah.
It's just trying to... we always have this issue. How on earth do you put him and Bamford in the team without taking away from the team? It's a cyclical thing that I don't think we'll ever...
Yeah, it's just really easy. You just play Nketiah and you take Bamford out. I mean, it's that simple. Size is everything. How much of an improvement would Size have made had we kept him based off all of his time with us against his key passes, assists or XG?
I haven't actually looked into this, sorry.
I'll take that one back.
Yeah. But, I mean, what I would say is that actually Saez under Bielsa was not quite so impressive as Saez under previous managers, which is harsh because I think Saez was still useful. The question is, to what extent does a natural number 10 fit within a Bielsa system? And I don't really think Bielsa doesn't. I mean, we were talking before about Stuart Dallas. Like, he loves players who he can play anywhere. Like players who he can just solve by putting a square peg in a round hole. You know, he loves doing that. I'm not entirely sure. I'm thinking back through his previous teams. I'm even struggling to think of like
is the one. For me.
Yeah, Payet, but even then, Payet didn't really play as a 10 when he played at Marseille.
He didn't, but he was that kind of maverick guy who. He managed,
we've got Pablo, who's like
true.
He's like obviously Pablo towards the end of his career, but that sort of out and out number 10 that we talk about, and I think is a sort of classic position for football fans to want. We don't see quite so much of it as we used to, but I also think Bielsa, he likes his teams are all about movement. Being creative through movement rather than being creative through sheer talent. If you're requiring someone to be sheerly talented to get by, then you're missing the point of a lot of the tactics.
One of the problems is obviously we shape our team based on the players that are playing. But I've got some stats. So Saez did end 3rd in our second assist table and 5th overall in our assist table. Bearing in mind he barely played from October. Yeah. So he was a huge impact at the start of the season, and then there was a period after October where he came in and out of the side, and frankly,
there was already issues going on at this point as well, so it is unfair to judge him on that, I think.
The problem is that he when Bielsa came in, Saiz was the top dog, whereas Payet is a player that Bielsa made top dog.
True.
And there's a big difference there, because Bielsa is, as we said about the collective, everyone has to fit in and do the right thing. So when Saiz was on form, it was incredible. He could unlock defences like no other, and probably was one of the best at it in the Championship for the first couple of months of last season. The problem is when he didn't do it, Bielsa's team can't carry passengers. We just can't. I mean, we see that with Harrison. He gets whipped off at half time.
Yeah. Well, they were your listener questions. If you did send them in, thank you. We really appreciate it. I know they do at All Stats, aren't we? Next, though, we do turn our attentions to the game on the weekend. It is Millwall, and I'm delighted to say we will have a very special opposition preview.
I gave Kim Jong-un the upper hand, but only a tiny one.
Giving your team a voice. Love Sport Radio.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
You're in leakage, you're in leakage. You're in leakage, you're in leakage. You're in leakage. You're in leakage, you're in leakage.
Tenna men.
Cage.
Pants and pads.
You're
discreet. Masculine.
You're
secure absorption zone. Buy online or in shops.
You're
Tenna men. Keep control.
Urine?
No.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit WEDOOH.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
Whoa! Look how much saturated fat is in these chocolate biscuits. It's surprising how much is in our food and drinks. For us kids, eating too much saturated fat can lead to harmful fat building up inside, which we can't see, increasing the risk of heart disease or stroke when we get older. So be food smart. Download the free Change for Life food scanner app and start making healthier choices today.
This is Love Sport.
You are listening to the Leeds Fan Show on Love Sport Radio with me, Charlie Hawkins. Delighted to say I'm joined in the studio with John McKenzie and Mark Thompson from All Stats, aren't we? We have a stat. And I'm delighted to say now we are also joined with Stan Godwin from the Millwall Fan Show. We're doing a little crossover here of sorts, a transfer, an early January transfer window to talk about the game on the weekend. Stan, it's a real pleasure to have you in the studio. Stan, just before we get your thoughts on the game on the weekend, I've got a stat for you. Well, Mark's got a stat for you about Leeds and how they perform in London, which might make you feel a lot better, please, Mark.
Not well. Last 7 games against Millwall, we've won 1. Drawn 1, lost 5.
Yeah, well, you see, you see, when your record, when you come to us, right, your record has not been good for whatever reason, right, and because our lot get up for it. I mean, I remember when we got back in the Championship, and our first home game, or not, it was when we played you at home. One of our blokes said he had a banner there. I mean, how he had got it in the ground, I don't know, but he had this banner, and it said, "I bet you're glad to see us," and all this sort of thing. And no, I mean, they just this thing with Leeds goes back to the 80s, right? And they just love it. I mean, they're reveling it somehow.
Well, they love playing you. They certainly don't like playing in London. It's a very they've got a terrible time in London of late. They obviously lost to Charlton recently, Stan.
That was a surprise, I must admit.
It was a surprise, but obviously you're managerless. We're going to talk a lot more about that on the Millwall show, so please stay around for that. But Stan, just on the game itself, and you are a manager, Dan, what are your thoughts going into that one? What should Leeds be worried about Millwall?
Everything. And I say that because you know, I watched Millwall the other night.
Yeah.
And I watched them last Saturday, right? And tomorrow's game, in terms of performance, will bear no resemblance to them two games
Yeah.
because the moment we kick off, and it's got nothing to do with Harris, but because it'd be the same even if he was there anyway, right?
Yeah.
From the moment they kick, if for example you kick off tomorrow. From the moment you kick off, their blokes are not going to get a moment's peace.
Yeah.
Because to be fair, we know Leeds are a good side. I mean, it's mind blowing the fact that they've been there 3-4 years. They've got near the end and still can't get out of the division, right? But our lot won't. Our lot will not give them a moment's peace.
Well, John, Mark, do you want to ask any questions about Millwall the game this weekend?
Well, Neil Harris was one of obviously the big cheerleaders for you guys. Whenever we played you, the week run into those games, he'd always drop something to wind our fans up and get your fans going. So you don't think that's going to affect it at all?
No, because if it was other clubs, it might have been. But as I say, Leeds. I mean, for example, let's say he was still there. But he'd been in some indiscretion, and they sort of said, "Oh, well, you've got to stay up in the director's box, for example." Right? I mean, would have made no difference in terms of what would happen on the field, because a lot will be up for it.
Well, let me ask the Leeds then. Do you feel like this is a good time to be playing Millwall with no manager, or the wrong time? Because sometimes you hear it when a manager has left. It can have a good effect, a positive effect on a team. Because, like Stan said, they get up for it. Millwall won't need to be getting up for this game. They will be. Is it the right or wrong time from a Leeds perspective?
I have to say, my first thought when I saw Neil Harris had left was, "Oh, that's good. That's like a positive thing," because his face and his actions on the bench he was always like a cheerleader, was always like calling everyone on, pushing everyone forward.
I mean, even before he was a manager, he was causing us problems.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not, we're not upset about it by any stretch. But as I said, we never go to Millwall, and I think we're going to get a result.
Yeah.
That's if we get a draw, I'm happy to get it out of the way with, get a point, move on, because it's a horrible place for us to go to. I think even the game we won, we conceded a penalty in the last minute, and you hit the bar. So we have to luck something out of it. Yeah. I'd like to think that we've learned from some of the. We know it's going to be a tight game because it always is with Millwall, but maybe we've learned something from our bad results so far this season.
Well, let me ask the same question to you, Stan, from the Millwall perspective. The first game without Neil Harris, are you glad that it is Leeds because it's the players that they're going to be up for it anyway, or would you have liked to face a different opponent this weekend?
No, I mean it is what it is, right? I mean, all right, Neil Harris ain't going to be there, and then we have to deal with that, right? So in one respect, it doesn't matter because, I mean, the acting manager, or even if you had another manager come. So Harris went, yesterday, and the day we was being told, "Oh, this is the new guy," for example. I mean, he wouldn't, and they turn up tomorrow at the den. There's not a lot he's got to say in terms for that particular game, right? Because it would just take care of itself in that sense. I mean, our lot will be up and there'll be, I mean, it's funny because one of the blokes our lot used to give a load of grief to was your old centre for Beckford, right? And I used to like Beckford, and I got a lot of time for him because he always copped it. Now I don't know what used to be. I mean, I heard some of what was said to him. Whether anything else was said to him, I don't know. And if it was, he kept it to himself, right? And I said to some bloke one day, I think it was Nick Hart, funny enough. I said to him, we were due up and he was there, and I said, we're going to pay. I said, so we're all giving this abuse. I said, but one day he's going to turn it on your head, and because what happens on that day, he scores 2 goals, doesn't he? Because he's running around the pitch with his hands up. I mean, if you dish it out, you've got to take it, haven't you?
Of course you have.
Yeah, I was just going to say with the whole losing Harris before the game, like Bielsa obviously micromanages his team as well, so he will have been looking at all of the games that have happened this season with Millwall, and a lot of that stuff's just going to be thrown in the bin. So there is an extent to which, I guess, if you're being cynical about it, you could say, well, it does play in our favour because we don't really know what's going to happen.
There was that Stoke game last season when it was the first
Nathan Jones game.
I think Nathan Jones. How was it his first game? It was his first game. And we'd looked at all of Nathan Jones' past games, and they went, you know what, I'm going to do something completely different. Exactly. And then they ended up winning 2-1. It was like one of the only games they've won. Yeah. But whilst you're here, we have to ask you about Big Matt Smith. He's come full circle.
Yeah, you see, no, I like Matt Smith, but if you're going to sign a player like Matt Smith, then you've got to give him service, right? Now, against QPR, for example, you know, instead of him being in the area, which wasn't his fault because he wasn't there, he was always in the QPR half, right? Because they kept pumping long balls down, and because he's got the big centre half behind him, the other bloke in front of him screening him, and because his job is to lay it off for other people. Well, they're feeding on scraps, right? And with Matt Smith, it's no good trying to put the ball through to him and for him to run on, because he ain't got the pace, you see. So what you need him in the area, and you need two people going wide that's going to put crosses in.
Can you keep him in your half for the entirety of this match, please?
Well, I don't think. I think he's going to be. Well, I mean, I think he'll be revelling this tomorrow.
No, well, he was unlucky because he signed his contract and then we sold him to Fulham straight away, didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, Stan, we're going to hear more of your thoughts on the game on the Millwall Fan Show, but as you are the opposition preview, what is your score prediction for the weekend?
Oh, I think we'll win 2-1.
Ah, I love it. Of course you do, Stan. Millwall 2-1. That is not what they want to hear. Compounding them London troubles for Leeds. John, it is your turn to reply. What is your score prediction for the weekend?
I'm too wise to go for a confident prediction, I think, so I'm going to go with I'm going to do draw. I'm going to do a draw, 1-1.
Yeah, I said earlier I'd be happy with the draw. Give me 1-1 and get this out of the way.
Yeah.
Would you be? It's stupid, but would you be happy with a draw? Or?
No, I wouldn't. I'd be really annoyed. But
especially if we dominate the game and then
because we all know how the match is going to go. We're going to have the ball for 80% of the game. You're going to score from a corner, and then we hope that we're 1-0 up by that time, and then that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
With the stats and how Leeds have played in London, a point still not good enough for what you want to achieve.
There will be other games. It's a long season. We'll get there will be other points we'll pick up. It's just this is a good one to get out of the way.
Yeah,
it is a good one to get out of the way. Well, this has been the Leeds Fan Show. Don't go anywhere because the Millwall Fan Show is next. But this was the Leeds Fan Show with John McKenzie and Mark Thompson from All Stats, Aren't We? We have a stat. You can catch it every Friday, 8 till 9, right here on Love Sport Radio. But up next, it is Millwall.
Love sport.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure?